want to thank you, everybody, for coming and joining us on this edition of the Mayor's Brief. With me, I have W.B. Bullock, who is a councilman, been here for at least 20 years. I have a special relationship with Councilman Bullock. He and my father grew up in a little town called Beargrass, North Carolina. So I want to welcome you to the show, Councilman Bullock.
Thank you.
So, look, what experience or what could you share with me? Let's just start there. Having been on the council for 20 plus years, I'm a freshman mayor. What would you tell me if you were sitting in my shoes?
So many people, I think, move into a new position and they're excited, and sometimes they get so excited they don't know what they're doing there.
Sure.
And that's interesting. I've been watching you. I mean, seriously, it's we have to take it seriously, but there are some things that it need more than one opinion, and it's often very, very exciting to find out that someone is thinking the same way you are, and then again, sometimes they're totally different. But in the years that I have been here, I have been very, very fortunate that we've had a good council, and I've never seen any, as the old country folks used to say, knock down and drag out. So I feel like I have been very, very fortunate to have good mayors and good council members, and above all, good people with the city, the professional people that we can depend on, because that's where most of our support comes from.
You know, somebody told me once, gave me a little advice, said, look, it's really your job not to screw it up.
Absolutely.
And when you kind of put it in that perspective, it is running on its own. It's been doing that for 100 plus years. Yeah. You didn't create it, just don't screw it up. But with that said, I think that we could use a little direction and movement toward trying to achieve some goals for the community and trying to build some consensus. And you've been at this a long time, so what have been some of the biggest successes and drawbacks that we've had during that tenure that you've been around?
I think most of, excuse me, so many of what starts out as sometimes as a drawback, but as we get deeper into it, we find that it's usually an asset that we can build off of. And I'm just so excited. About 2 hours ago, I was going back to the house after lunch, and I saw some highway people out on the street. And I stopped to speak to them to see if they were our people. And they were for an outside paving contractor. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of jokingly said, well, just don't leave any of those long colored poles out there.
Sure.
I said, we don't need any more of those. We've got nothing. We grow our own. And he kind of chuckled. He said, I feel that same way too. And I'm not going to call the company name because that may not be from in the best light. But he said, and I told him who I was, and he said, well, how long have you been in Rocky Mount with this particular job? And we chatted for a minute, and he said, I can't believe this. He said, I've been here 24 years with this particular company. And he said, and some days I still don't know what my job is. And we chuckled again, and he said, this project has been on the books, he explained it, I think. I think he said something like over 20, 22 years.
Wow.
And it's a paving project that either got overlooked or the funds got cut, sent somewhere else or whatever. But he was very happy. He said, we're going to start work Monday morning.
Well, I'll be told. Been on the books for 20-some years, right? Wow, that's a long PO.
Yeah. And the first thing we're going to get Well, I sure hope it doesn't take as long as it did Sunset Avenue, but this is a fairly short city project.
Sure.
And then the next one will say, well, how much is it going to cost? Well, I have no idea. It's been on the books that long, but I'm sure there's some money been shifted from this account to this account, and that used to be a no-no.
Right.
You didn't shift, but now you have to, because you got to have the project available when the funds are available. And so I'm looking forward to it because it's in my area.
Well, and it is interesting. Everything's funded a little bit differently, right? I remember we were having a conversation in one of the more recent meetings of the council, and we're talking about sidewalk projects, and somebody wanted one, in their ward. I can't remember the specifics, and I think you said, look, that's a state road. That's why those sidewalks are there. That's not a city road. So, there are some distinctions even within, say, a Sunset Avenue versus Woodlawn Avenue or Virginia Avenue. Some are state roads and some are not. And so it does matter where the funds come from and what the resources are. So we've got a number of projects in front of us, speaking of which, I think road construction is one of them that we've got to consider. So any insight or thoughts that you have on how we get that paid for? Because now we're going through a COVID-19 lack of funding, lack of taxes. Everybody's taking a hit. And so we've got some real challenges and infrastructure issues in front of us.
Right.
And I don't mean to suggest that we're falling apart, but we do have some deferred maintenance we need to get ahead of.
Absolutely. And we've been involved in so many things over the last 8 to 10 years that, quite frankly, and I've disagreed with it, but it works out sooner or later. But we have neglected a lot of local maintenance and upkeep. But now we're in a position where we got rid of Sunset Avenue, and that was the largest project, I'm sure, that's been in Rocky Mountain, probably in its lifetime. That was a lot of money. And we waited a long time for it.
Sure.
And sometimes people don't understand, well, why can't you go ahead? But we got to meet certain requirements and otherwise, and it just doesn't happen overnight.
Well, and it's not just us, right? So the funds are maybe partly from the city, partly from the state, and there may be even a federal matching grant or fund to that. So the planets kind of have to line up too in terms of the timing. And the other thing, particularly about roads, people get so upset about it. Gosh, it takes so long. Well, that's just part of the process. If you want a new road, it's just going to take a while, and eventually it gets to where it needs to be. So that's it. Been my thought anyway. So what are you hearing from folks in your ward? I mean, in terms of issues that they see in the city of Rocky Mount, they believe that we need to be looking at and focused at?
I live in a community, streets, that we have a good mixture of citizens. We even have some older than I am. But most of them are good, solid citizens. And I don't get a terrific number of complaints. Did a couple of weeks ago when we got behind on our trash pickup.
I tell you what, I got my share of those too.
And one gentleman asked me, we were standing in his front yard, and he said, be honest with me now. Who messed this project up? Was it you, or you? And I didn't really have an answer for it. I said, it takes more than one person to screw it up, and it takes more to make it a success too.
Right.
But, and by the way, he was down from our part of the country.
Well, I think what's funny is that in that issue in particular, the city manager was trying to build two teams, right? So if you had one team that somehow or another contracted COVID-19, that you still had an ancillary group that could go and take over the service. So what that means is it's just less efficient, but you're trying to preserve your labor and your ability to be able to take trash going forward forever or for an extended period of time. And yeah, I'm amazed at the number of phone calls I got and complaints and videos. And I just told them, I said, just call my council member, which is you, and gave him your number. So that worked out, I think, okay. No, yeah, I was able to explain to a lot of folks, but I mean, wow, a lot of folks are all bent out of shape over that.
Right, yeah. And people, I'll give you an example. These people may have called you. But sometimes our citizens get so bound up that they lose a sense of purpose. I was walking late afternoon 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I found a pile of trash twice the size of this table. About a third of it was on the citizens' property. Mm-hmm. Another third was on the edge of the street. And the other third, it looked like they had purposely raked it up where it could, just as soon as it rained, it would wash down the culvert, which is not where it needs to be.
Right.
And I stood there and watched that. And I looked over here, and there was a couple of being a country boy like we are, there was what I call about a 6 foot tall post, fence post, wooden fence post, laying in the edge of the street. And I thought, surely they know the same truck that picks up leaves doesn't pick up this 10-foot. Right. And there behind that was a huge roll of rusty fence wire.
Well, nobody's going to take that up.
Where did that come from in the city of downtown? But anyway, about 3 days later, it was gone.
Okay.
And that's the way things work sometimes.
Well, I will say I do think the city has done a remarkable job considering the circumstances that they've been confronted with. Really, I will say that. So I'd like to ask you, I mean, what are the 3 biggest opportunities you think we have as a city and as a community for either economic development or at least growth or whatever you see are the 3 biggest opportunities in front of us?
I suppose that most people who've been citizens of Rocky Mount for a while, their first thought is more economic development.
Okay.
And we have done, in the past 15 to 20, 22, 25 years, we have done a fantastic job with that. Mm-hmm. Everything that we went after, we didn't get.
Right.
But we got a good portion of them, and we've got a good group, economic development group that I think does a great job. The most disappointing thing is, they come into town looking at, we want this kind of property, we want this road frontage, we want this back fence and all that. And we get really excited. And we court these people for about 30 to 45 days, and all of a sudden, they up and leave.
Well, everybody else is too, right?
That's right.
That's part of it.
That's right. But we can't give up.
Right.
We got to keep it hanging in there.
And what I'll say, one of the challenges about that is, at least to my knowledge, you don't get what I would call that that interview or that, okay, what were the issues? What could we improve upon? Or why, or maybe there was nothing wrong, but what did somebody else do better than we did? So you don't get that debrief to kind of help you refine either your pitch or your direction or your focus. So economic development is obviously one. So what's another area that you see that you believe that Rocky Mount should be headed toward in positive ways?
Well, I guess the second one that most people think of and speak dearly of is education.
Sure.
that's another one that's hard to get everyone to agree on. But since we often wonder, why can't I, as a downtown citizen or longtime citizen, why can't I have a say-so on it? But the bottom line is that everyday butts and bolts doesn't necessarily follow the educational line, because we got so many different parts of education.
Right.
Yeah, it's not just going out and hiring somebody who looks like they might be a good teacher, because that's a trade.
That's right.
And it's I've been amazed at some of the things that we have accomplished through the educational connections, and I'm just pleased with what we've got. And that's a problem most everywhere, especially in a smaller, what we basically are, a rural area. And we don't get some of those guys in here that have 4 degrees, and they don't always stay.
Right, and well, in education in particular is difficult because it's not something you fix in a year.
Right.
It's not something you change in a year. You can start a trend in a positive direction, and I personally don't think our school system's broken. I think we are doing everything that we know how to do, and I think we're doing it well. It's just that we have to provide some additional community support, you know, for some of the kids who don't have the same opportunities. How do we elevate them or provide enough security that they can prosper the way that we've designed an educational system? And I know, but that's really, I think, it a lot. You know, you can't really blame the kid, you can't really blame the teacher. But it is a community issue.
Well, I've heard some comments in the last few days and weeks, having spent a whole lot more time at home.
Right. I think that's true of all of us.
But I think, and I heard a commentator this morning on one of the morning shows. I can't remember what they are. There's so many of them. I can't remember what they are and who they are, so I don't watch many of them. But I did hear a commentator this morning make a comment that he hoped that our younger parents and teenage students on down took an opportunity, along with parents, to learn from what we have gone through the last 4 to 6 weeks.
Right.
And it's going to be awful. It's going to be different. Instead of going home and listening in the evening, listening to mom and dad fuss about you have not spent enough time on this particular project, they can solve that project oftentimes in a few minutes.
Right. With
the technology and all that we have today, and correspondence and everything. And so, and you know, is it going to take 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 6 months, or a year? And so many of our people have the answers, but they just don't know where to use them.
Sure, I understand. I understand.
I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like, you know, going to high school today.
Whew, it's been so long for me too. I don't know. I remember all the good stuff. I don't know that I remember the challenges associated with it. But those were good days for me.
I just hope our young people, along with their teachers, instructors, parents, that they jump on this thing, just grab the ball and go with it.
Right.
And I think, you know, a lot of people say, well, I don't worry about it. I won't be here 20 years from now or 30 years from now. But somebody's going to be here.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's your child, your grandchild, somebody, absolutely. Well, what are the 2 things you hear or you see or you believe that are most challenging and vexing to Rocky Mount right now, that's something that we just need to work through as a community? You know, problems aren't bad. It's just the unsolved ones that get to be a challenge.
there are a lot of opportunities and challenges. And while one person may jump right onto this and take the ball and go with it, where another one says, well, you know, I didn't have technology when I was coming along, and here I am, middle-aged now, and what I do. And I think, and another thing I have heard, I won't use any names or anything, but I have heard several people in the last few days, and I heard one yesterday, he said, my son, my daughter, both in middle class school, that they are totally disappointed because they are not going to graduate.
Right. I have heard that repeatedly myself.
And it bothered me because, you know, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
You may not get a diploma, but you'll get a shake a hand or...
Yeah, you'll get a diploma, but you just don't get that moment on stage, I suppose.
Yeah. But that hadn't even dawned on me until I heard a teenager, I assume about 18.
Right.
Till he mentioned that. And
right.
I thought, what's the big deal? Sure you are going to go...
Well, you're going to graduate. It's just not in the traditional sense.
You're not going to walk across the stage.
The ceremony. You know, ceremony is important, I think.
It is.
For people. It marks time. It marks occasion. It marks life. Yeah, I get it. I get it. It's important to us.
And it is. It's important to, when those students think about some of the tragedies that they have seen, and they're comparing it to this one, and this you know, most of us never experienced anything like this. Right.
Well, I haven't. Don't even. This is just surreal almost. I feel like I'm watching one of those Contagion movies when you know, this invisible monster that's around every corner and it's real, but you know, you can't see it and touch it and feel it or beat it.
Well, that just irritates me.
I know, right?
But there are so many things that these kids who are, you know, when they get 40, 45, 50, 60, they'll be thinking about the tragedies that their parents went through, and did they give them what they needed or what they had available?
Right.
I was going in a post office one morning last week, and I ran into a gentleman that I've known since I've been in Rocky Mount. And he kind of jokingly said, when are we going to take another trip? And I said, I've about quit taking trips. He said, no, there's still lots of places we need to go. And what he was referring to, he and I and a couple of other guys happened to be on a workshop type thing with our companies, and we were in Salt Lake City on 9/11.
Oh, okay.
And we didn't get excited. We said, well, we'll go rent a car and head back home. No cars could be taken out of state.
Wow.
Some were, but
sure,
very few. And you know, I think that was a tragedy. You know, that everyone from 75 down will remember in some way or another. And things like that just. But then you got to look and say, but how fortunate I was. We had no problem.
That's right.
Long story, I won't tell you that. But friendship, being able to adjust from what we were there for, institutional things that the companies were in, and we got a free trip. And
yeah, that's right. And an adventure to get back, it sounds like. So.
Yeah. Real quickly, I'll tell you.
Yeah, well, I got to hear. So, I mean, you like rent a car to go to the state line, then rent another car, at least cover the next state. And
this after the pageant, I mean, the music and all that night.
Mm-hmm.
The Tabernacle Choir changed their whole program to a program of remembrance and forgiveness.
How about that?
And people sit there and cried for 2 hours.
Well, you know, my 9/11 story was I was in Washington, D.C. at a conference, and the Pentagon had gotten hit, and so they were setting up barricades. I was right by the Capitol. They were setting up barricades everywhere. Troops were being deployed. You had checkpoints, and it really did feel like you were a part of a movie.
It did.
And then driving back home, I had to go through Fort Lee, Virginia. They wouldn't let you get on 95, and I had to meander all through the Commonwealth to ultimately get back home. And it was a surreal experience, and it was a frightening couple of days. Well, look, I think our time's run out, but is there anything else you'd just like to share with us or me before we parting thoughts, we'll call it?
I just think that Rocky Mount is a great, and we still refer to by most people as a small town. But I think we just have so many opportunities. And every now and then I keep hearing someone griping and complaining. And I think to myself, this person has got too much greed.
Right.
Share with someone else. We're gonna come out. It may take longer than we planned, but I just feel like and I have watched more television in the last 4 weeks than I've done my entire life. I was an adult before I knew what a TV was. But I just feel like that we got to learn to get along with each other and to trust each other.
Sure.
And I'm not being a fanatic or anything, but there's just so much opportunity that we can get a part of it.
Well, look, my mother likes to often say that Jesus died for a relationship.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, there's nothing more important than that. And that requires trust, it requires faith, it requires trying to meet each other in the middle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we got to get rid of, we got to think about everyone around the table and not just me. And
it is hard to get caught up in your own lenses.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for being here, WB, and thank you for your service to our community.
Well, thank you. I just feel like I've been very, very fortunate, and been offered a lot of opportunities that I would not have had somewhere else. I came from a large family, so there was not an abundance of many things, but I learned a lot from my family, and I'm just very, very pleased with some of the things we got going on.
Me too. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Mayor Sandy Robertson here with Jenny Moore-Butter, and she's with the United Way here to tell us some of the needs that we have in our community and to ask for your support.
Thank you, Mayor. We are so happy to be here to support our community. We ask for your help in donating to our COVID Relief Fund. This fund will help our local citizens who might have food insecurities, financial instability. We want to make sure our families and our individuals are stable. So we ask for your support of our COVID-19 Relief Fund.